On the show today, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith joins us to talk about the carbon tax, Alberta's future in oil and gas, as well as concerns with the Alberta pension plan.
Oh, yeah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Today's a momentous day here on the channel and one that I'm very proud to show with you guys. Today, I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to discuss all of the ongoing issues with Alberta's economy in terms of oil and gas, carbon tax subsidies, what the province can expect coming down the pipe, as well as questions and concerns in regards to at least what some of my concerns are when it comes to the Alberta pension plan that's being pitched. Now, while it was a great interview to sit down with Danielle Smith, and we'll get into that right in a moment, I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that if you enjoy what you're seeing here today, I hope this interview and this video earns your subscription. Make sure as you're hitting that subscribe button to turn on your bell for notifications and join us here on the channel every Sunday where we do our live streams and weekly wrap at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. We go over everything that's happened in the prior week, everything coming up in the week ahead. Have a little bit of Q&A with the community, and it's always great to see new people joining us in that community and chiming into the chat and giving their 2 cents on what they want to say. Now, before we get into the interview, I also wanted to take a minute to talk about this week's or this video's sponsor, I should say, which is actually Unacceptable Fringe. So today, if you're wanting to purchase any of our books, if you're a follower of the work that I do outside of YouTube, of course, our very viral How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom is available on sale for those who don't like to purchase directly from Amazon. You can now purchase directly from, well, me. I'm shipping them out across Canada, and all of our prices on our website, unacceptablefringebooks.com, has all of our products available. We also have a special holiday bundle that's available now that features our original How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, as well as our newest book, How the Prime Minister Broke Canada, which is now available on Amazon. It's available on our site. Now, just to keep in mind, every purchase on our site does come with a signed book from myself, as well as include free Canada-wide shipping. So I hope you guys head your way over there today and pick up your copies of Unacceptable Fringe's media. They make great gift ideas, great stocking stuffer ideas. And well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on with the interview. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today on the show, which needs no introduction, but we'll give one anyways, Premier Danielle Smith joining us here today on the show to discuss the current situation in Alberta with federal politics. Premier Smith, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have
Thanks,
you here.
Derek. Nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. Premier Smith, I wanted to bring you on a little bit to talk about initially oil and gas in Alberta, because it's been an ongoing issue, I find, especially since around the 2015 era when we've seen Justin Trudeau take office. Of course, after Rachel Notley being the Premier of Alberta, and we've seen the devastation that was put forward to the oil and gas industry in terms of putting forward new projects, pipelines being canceled, and of course, Justin Trudeau's infamous No Pipelines bill. We've seen the victory now in the Supreme Court of Canada, and of course, you've made no qualms about talking about Alberta's future and investment. You've said many times that Alberta's open for business. I just had a question in regards to where we move forward as a province, because again, I've always felt that Alberta is a province of prosperity. It's one where people are willing to get their hands dirty and go to work, and they're ready to reap the rewards of that. When we talk about Trudeau's plan for 2030 and how it really wasn't feasible. We couldn't meet those objectives. And I know that you've said that 2050 seemed like more of a reasonable timestamp in order to put forward greener technologies. And as time goes on, of course, technology changes. But for companies or for investors coming into Alberta, is there anything they should be worried about, or what would cause them to want to invest in Alberta if by 2050 we're going to be meeting the same kind of restrictions that potentially we're talking about for 2030?
Well, you put a lot on the table there. Let me see if I can take it apart in pieces. So first of all, going back to the Notley era, one of the things that they tried to do was to get social license. And in trying to get social license, they made, I think, some critical errors. Number one, they thought that by phasing out coal early, that by bringing in a carbon tax and by putting a cap on oil sands emissions, that would somehow buy us enough social license that the federal government would now look at us as a partner in collaborative federalism, and we'd be able to move forward hand in hand. Well, it is true that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is really not that far away from being built. So that's one positive that came out of it. But look at everything that was lost. We didn't get Northern Gateway. Energy East got canceled. The Keystone XL pipeline got canceled, barely a fuss out of the federal government. Major oil sands projects like the Tech Frontier mine got canceled. We saw an exodus of oil workers out of this province, 13 quarters of consecutive net out migration. I've talked to companies that used to have a pretty balanced portfolio between here and the U.S. Any new growth has been in the U.S. That has been the consequence of us trying to appease environmental extremists and Ottawa extremists, that we went so far down a path that it ended up, we didn't get anywhere near what we needed for what we were hoping for. Now, look at the carbon tax. Carbon tax may have started off as something quite reasonable. Now, at $65 per ton, it's devastating families, which is why we and the other premiers have taken very strong positions saying it should be off home heating fuel. We think that the retail carbon tax should be gone altogether. It's way too high. Imagine what it's going to be when it's $170 per ton, how damaging that's going to be to families and to affordability. And then, of course, on the issue of the coal phase out, happened way too early, cost billions of dollars, created instability in our power grid and price spikes. So I do want to be charitable to those who, tried something new, but it failed. And as a result, the federal government got emboldened. And they just figured they could walk all over us, walk into our jurisdiction, and we would just lay it down and take it. And we haven't. We won the Bill C-69 challenge. In fact, hot off the presses, we just won another challenge today as well, as they tried to declare plastics toxic. The Supreme Court said that's an overreach and unconstitutional as well. And we're just going to keep on challenging them. We are not going to let them take over our regulation of our energy industry or our regulation of our electricity production. We're a responsible producer. We believe we can get to carbon neutrality by 2050, but we are not going to sacrifice our energy workers because of some unachievable target set by people living in Ottawa who don't even understand our context.
Fantastic. And that's as much as what I figured. While we're on the topic of carbon taxes and how people are going to get by, recently Premier Scott Moe again came out talking about his January 1st due date for no longer collecting carbon tax. Of course, I've seen your interviews where you've talked about, it's a crown corporation. There's different laws for that. And of course, we've seen Pierre Poilievre's bill to have initial carve-outs for the rest of Canada denied by the Bloc. So I guess my question is as we head into this winter season now, and I know that maybe there's things you can't discuss, but are there plans in the Alberta government's book to still try to make some form of energy affordable, or find some way to make things feasible for people that are just getting by check to check over the winter months?
Well, I'm watching with great interest what's happening in Saskatchewan, because that is one of the advantages that Scott Moe has by having a crown corporation, is that he can tell them don't collect it, and then ultimately, I guess we'll see who ends up going to jail or who ends up getting the fines. In Alberta, I would be asking our private sector companies to take on that risk, and that's not an appropriate thing for me to do. If I want to keep an environment where people want to invest here, I can't be asking them to shrug off federal laws. We believe that the federal government has to behave responsibly, and they have completely undermined the argument they made at the Supreme Court about why they wanted to put a carbon tax in place in the first place. Their argument was that they needed to be able to have this federal power so that all regions and all consumers would be treated the same. And now they've got special rules for Quebec, special rules for Atlantic Canada, special rules for certain types of home heating. And they've completely undermined their argument about why it should be federal jurisdiction. Because quite frankly, if you're going to make the argument that you need to make regional exceptions, well, that's a prime reason why our founders decided that certain things should be determined at the provincial level rather than the federal level. So it plays right into our argument that they have overstepped. I've consulted our lawyers to see if we can retry that case with this new information, because I think, number one, the schedule of going up to $170, that was not known at the time. No arguments were made about whether it was affordable. No arguments were made about whether it was technologically feasible. No arguments were made about whether there were alternative pathways forward. And I think that now that they've demonstrated that they're putting the carbon tax on in a very political way and in an unfair way, I think we can relitigate that. The second thing that we've done is that we've already taken the fuel tax off of gasoline and diesel. That doesn't help, sadly, for home heating. But that is one other area that we have been able to, we now have the lowest gas and diesel prices in the country as a result of that. I think it's been able to mitigate some of the inflationary increases that we've seen. So that's positive. And we have a major change coming in how our electricity grid is going to operate. Part of the uncertainty the federal government created by essentially telling anyone if they were building a natural gas plant, if they weren't almost fully abated by 2035, they'd face criminal sanction. They've put a total chill on us being able to bring on any new baseload power. So we have said we're going to assert our jurisdiction. We are going to be building new natural gas baseload. We have to do it because I can't have our power grid with this kind of instability, this kind of unaffordability, and the potential that the lights will go off. So you'll be seeing more about that in the coming weeks as well.
Great. So I seen you wheeling out a heat pump on this hour last week. So we're not seeing any kind of heat pump push in Alberta then?
It's funny. I think when the federal government announced that they were going to have this heat pump program to try to say, oh, we're doing it fairly across the country, anybody would have access to this. I think we have, I consulted my department, and I think we have 300 people of our 4.7 million people that have heating oil. So it would be a pretty minor amount of people who would be impacted by that decision. And the other part too, and I've told them at the federal level, I wasn't kidding when I said that on This Hour's 22 Minutes. I don't think they work here because you have to have a backup if your temperature goes below minus 25, which it does, especially as you get further north, because insurance companies will not cover you if they're worried that your pipes are going to freeze because your heat isn't working. So that's again the lack of practicality that we have with the federal government. It's the reason these decisions need to be made at the provincial level.
Right, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Now, I know we're limited on time, so I'm going to segue off of that just to ask you about when we're talking about affordability. One thing that's really caught my interest recently is your Alberta pension plan and the offer for referendum. I've been on board when you're talking about no tax increases without referendum. I think you're very attuned to making sure that people have fail-safes, that within their government things are going to be ran properly. But when it comes to the Alberta pension plan, people are on the fence. And of course, a good friend of the channel, Marty up north, had a tweet put out showing, here's what I pay for the federal Canada pension plan. Here's, how much I get back. I'm not getting as much as I put out. So when it comes to an Alberta pension plan, I know there's a lot in the media right now that talks about, is the money even there? And is that why the federal government is putting so much fight against Alberta separating and needing that money back? So I guess, are there, a lot of my viewers have raised concern that if Alberta were to do it, is it just being recoined, or is there any fail-safes being put in place that if there isn't a UCP government in the future, that people's money is going to be protected and essentially not put in the situation that people are assuming with the federal government, that their money could be at risk or not even there when it comes time to retire?
I think it's taking some time to educate the public about how our pension works, because I think people think it's a lot like an RRSP, that money comes off your check and it goes into an account with your name on it, and then it gets invested over time. In fact, we still have a pay-as-you-go system. So the people who are paying today, those premiums go to pay the beneficiaries of today. It just so happens in Alberta that we have more people paying in than our beneficiaries. I think last year we paid in $9 billion worth of revenue, and seniors took out $6 billion worth of benefits. So that means that $3 billion of additional amounts went into the CPP investment fund. And that's, if you go back and look at how that has happened year after year since the plan was first created in 1966, we do have in the life work report the year by year amount of how many extra premiums we paid, what it would be invested at if it was compounded. And that's where we came up with the $334 billion. Now, to your broader question, is the value that is stated on the books of the value of the CPP investments, is it accurate? That's something we have to find out. I understand that there's a lot of private equity that is in there. Normally in a pension plan, I'm told that you would have about 10% private equity. They're at almost a third private equity. There's a whole page of investments in China, which makes me a little bit concerned. I'd want to know what that is all about. There have been articles that have been written for years by Andrew Coyne, who doesn't love the idea of an Alberta pension plan, but he has been pretty ferocious in arguing that the management structure has become so bureaucratic and costly at the CPP. It's now, I think, $4 billion a year in management fees. So there's obviously some conversations that we're going to have about that, because whether or not Albertans want to have us have our own pension plan or not, we do need to have more say over how our over contributions are invested. They can't just be taking money from Alberta, not consulting us or giving us seats on the board, not giving us a voice, and then investing it in a way that's against our pensioners' interests. So one way or the other, we will get to the bottom of that very question. I'm hopeful that the numbers are accurate. But when you do have private equity, you don't know what those numbers are until there's a transaction. Private equity, sometimes because it's an illiquid investment, it can take decades for you to be able to realize the value. So there's no question that it's a complicated discussion. But I think it's one we need to have. We need to take a closer look.
Sure, certainly. Well, I do applaud you for everything that you're doing, Premier Smith. And again, as I said before this interview started, I've never been more proud of where my vote has gone. I think that in the short time that you've received your mandate to take on the 4-year contract as Premier, I definitely have been shocked as to just how much you've done in so little time that I can honestly tell you I'm very eager to see what comes over the next 3.5 years from you. And I'm sure most of Alberta is too. At least that's the consensus on this channel. You have tons of support. And again, I thank you for coming onto this channel today to talk about these things. Hopefully we can have you back on at some point. I'd like to talk about more things like the restructuring of Alberta Health and other policies. And again, I understand you're very busy, but I wanted to thank you for taking this time to sit down with us and inform the viewers and keep us up to date on everything Alberta, and just keep up the good work. And we look forward to what comes down the pipe from you. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for that, Derek. Well, give us a little bit of time to make some progress on Alberta Health Services, and then I'll be able to show you what we've done, as opposed to just tell you what we're going to do. But I look forward to chatting with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on, Danielle. You have yourself a wonderful day.
You bet. You too. Thanks, Derek.
Take care.